My name's Ellis Lal, I'm 26. I come from a small Gloucestershire town called Dursley. Ethnically, I'm mixed race. My mum is English and my dad is of Indian heritage. I know it sounds a little bit cliche, but I think growing up I always knew I was slightly different. I do remember silly things like always wanting to play as the female character on like video games, for example, or when flicking through catalogues I particularly wouldn't be looking at the women, I'd be looking more at the men. And going through school, especially primary school, kind of knew that I was forming a lot more friendship groups with females, and I wouldn't always be looking at the females in a relationship kind of way, it'd be more looking at the boys as who I found attractive. It was something I did try to suppress a little bit, shall we say. I kind of felt like it wasn't right for me to be feeling that way. But definitely something I came to terms with more being a teenager. I think the hardships of secondary school and basically trying to give yourself an identity, it was something which I did find hard to come to terms with, but once we got there it was all fine. My coming out story actually was something that I find easy, even though I built it up to be really hard in my head. I remember I'd particularly fallen for this one boy at work, and so we're talking, I was 19, 20 years old at this point. He was openly gay and we both found each other attractive, and we were going on, I suppose, what you could call dates. And it got to the point where it was quite late at night, and I remember basically inviting him inside my house, and he only came in for about 10-15 minutes and my parents were downstairs, and I kind of said, "Hey guys, this is George." And we went upstairs, just chilled out for a little while, and then when it was time for him to go, my parents kind of looked at me and I kind of said, "Oh, you know, just a friend." And then I remember the next morning I was in the car with my mum and she said, "So who was that last night?" And I kind of just said, "I think I'm dating him." And I remember my mum's reaction was kind of like, "Oh, well, don't you think we should tell your father?" And I was like, "Yeah, I suppose we should do, really." So I remember calling him up not long after and basically saying, "I think I need to talk to you about who that boy was last night." And he kind of said, "Okay, so shall we go out tonight?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's go out." So I remember we went to an Indian restaurant and I kind of just said, "Well, yeah, I think I'm gay." And that was it, really. There was no hardships, that was it. My parents just said, "Okay, that's fine." So it was something which I think you read a lot of horror stories about, and I think especially some people would associate being from an Indian culture and background, it would be particularly harder. However, it wasn't something which I found to be that difficult. It was definitely something which I made it more difficult in my own head. Not with my father, no, but I will admit that my Indian side, like my grandparents, they aren't aware, and it is definitely something which I don't feel comfortable yet telling them, simply because of cultural differences. A lot of my Indian side of the family do know, but it is something that which we have chosen to keep away from my grandparents. They do live in this country and they are aware of how different people can be, but I just don't think they would understand that well or particularly accept it. So it is something which I'm cautious of. But the wider Indian community, I mean, where I live there isn't really one as such, but my boyfriend comes from Birmingham, and when we do go out there, obviously there is a much wider Indian community. So it's something I'm more cautious, and when I am with a lot of Indians, especially strangers, kind of always being conscious of how I'm coming across. So things from like body language, how I'm speaking, even down to like how I'm walking. So it's something that I try to be cautious of, but on the whole, no, I haven't really suffered any of those kind of horror stories as such. Difficulties in the 21st century. I mean, nowadays we all know how easy it is to find a date. I mean, you've only got to download an app, or the traditional methods of maybe going out to a bar or being introduced to someone else via a friend, kind of dead nowadays. And I think especially harder in the gay community itself. Someone's already known someone who slept with someone else or been in a relationship with someone else. And you often find that there's a lot of prejudice when it comes to online dating as well. You can be a lot more open, so we have things where people say, "Oh, no blacks" or "no femmes" or anything like that. And even sexual preferences comes in, so, you know, top or bottom, terms which can be used to identify sexual preference or even as a relationship preference. You do come across that sometimes, you know, casual racism, for example. I met my own boyfriend online through a non-conventional app, actually. It was actually through Instagram. So we never spoke to each other with the intention of, you know, meeting up. It was just something which happened more organically, more fluidly. My boyfriend is of Indian heritage, so we have faced a lot of difficulties there. His family aren't aware of his sexuality or of our relationship. He's still living at home, and if the truth were to be known, then there's a lot of things which could happen. He could potentially be ostracised from his family, from his community. And because he's still living at home, he's quite vulnerable to his family's choices and rules, I suppose you could say. Me and him have been together for 2 years, and like I've mentioned previously, because where he lives in the West Midlands, there's a lot stronger communities and ethnicities, and we do find ourselves being very cautious, even if we're like walking somewhere, of who might be seeing us, how it might be interpreted. So we kind of do, it's the unspoken rule, we keep a certain distance from each other. Definitely no PDA, definitely making sure that we don't come across as too camp, too feminine. It's always something you've got to be conscious of in the back of your mind. So that brings together a different kind of element to our relationship as well. It's kind of very much a closed door relationship, and in the 21st century I feel like if I was maybe with a white man, for example, it would potentially be easier. I feel like although gays and gay rights has come a hell of a long way in the last 100 years, for example, I feel like white homosexuals have it a lot easier than gays of a different ethnicity or different colour. So that's still something I think that in the 21st century we're getting there, but at the moment it's still kind of racially homogenous. So once it starts to accept that you can be black and you can be gay, or you can be Asian and you can be gay, it's not just a white thing. So I think that's something which can still be worked on. I've only ever been to one, and that was in Bristol Pride. In terms of gay prides, yeah, I'm all for them. I don't see how they would hinder people's knowledge or acceptance of the wider gay community. Me personally, I don't find myself wanting to go with them quite a lot. I have been invited quite a few times, and I think it's more down to a preference. I prefer to kind of keep my own company. I have quite a small friendship circle. I just don't like the outward brashness, and I don't tend to drink a lot. So yeah, it's just not really my kind of thing, to be honest. But I've got no problems with them being around. When it comes to feeling comfortable to come out, that is not something which has to ever really occur. I'd always say that there will never be a good time to, there will be better times than others. But if you feel like you can't come out, it's really definitely about knowing yourself and knowing your surroundings and your environment. If there's maybe potentially reasons that would jeopardize your even your life, for example, then, or you never really have to come out, that's fine. But if it's more of just like a preference, then it's just something you don't necessarily have to come to terms with, but just something which you have to feel comfortable with in yourself. And there's different spectrums, there's a whole different range, and you don't have to stick to one label, even if you feel like that is what you might be. It's just all about trying to feel comfortable, having just a few friends. There may be some people who would know already, but you don't really ever have to tell anyone if you don't want to. Just be great with who you are. More of a socially, what's the word? You have to edit this bit out.
That's right.